many people are in the room?
Not here, but we should be able to tell people are here if they tell us where they're listening from today. So if you guys are out and about, I'll go first. I'm in Birmingham, Alabama. No traveling for me today. Christian, what about you? Where are you hailing from today?
Raleigh, North Carolina.
All right. That sounds like a good one. And I hear you're on a big tour, right, of the U.S.?
More or less. Got started in New Jersey this morning, actually, and then Raleigh, then Columbus, then Seattle, then back home. So,
okay. So hopefully you'll miss all the snow, right?
Indeed.
Yeah. All right. Well, since Christian is traveling today, we are going to go ahead and get started. So we're going to start with introductions. So please tell me, who are you, Christian?
Sure. Thanks, Maria. So Christian Berger, I'm president of Berger Consulting Group, and I've been in the industry for a very long time, 30 years, maybe more than that even, and worked at FMI for about 8 years, went to work at JD Edwards, the software company, for a year, and then started my own firm after that. I've been serving the construction industry for 25 years through Berger Consulting, just helping contractors with technology, software, process improvement, IT strategy, a lot of things.
Yeah. There's a lot to help.
We work with mainly mid-size and larger general contractors, specialty, industrial, heavy civil. So quite the spectrum of contractors and different conditions. Some dealing with very modern technology, others who are trying to figure out what to do with their older technology. So it's never boring.
That's right. We're here to help everybody get out of Excel, right?
That's the goal.
If they want to, we'll get them out of Excel and then put them back in with a better data dump.
There you go.
Yeah. And then I am Maria Martin. I am the practice leader over at ConTech Financials. And one of my favorite things to do is to help out Berger Consulting on some projects whenever my skills are needed. Sometimes it's for Procore stuff, and sometimes it's to help out with the ERP stuff, which I really love. And it's about, as Christian explained, it's all kinds of folks, some people just getting started, some people upgrading from their first ERP that they chose in the 80s. Right. So let's not be embarrassed there. It's a lot of us, and we're here for it. And so we just love to do stuff like that. And today we're going to start with the evolution of the market. Right. And so we talked a little bit about the 80s. Maybe you're picking your first ERP since the 80s. And so, Christian, what's that been like for you after, what'd you say, 30 years?
Sure. So it's interesting to watch because there is quite a bit of legacy technology out there, and there's a number of modern technologies that have come online in the last, say, 5-7 years. And there's a pretty good momentum toward those kinds of solutions. Acumatica, Sage Intacct, NetSuite maybe. There's some other ones out there that are very modern, but they're not as mature functionally. And so what contractors are realizing is that some of these legacy solutions, as they might be called, are on dated tech stacks, but are actually functionally pretty rich. And so they have a little bit of a compromise they have to make when they're trying to move over to the modern. I would also say that the ERP footprint is changing a little bit. Back when these packages were initially started, they all generally had the same thing: general ledger, accounts payable, job costs, billing, et cetera. And there weren't many external solutions that tied in, maybe estimating. Today, that's changed quite a bit. Now we've got project management systems, HR systems, time card, equipment, credit cards. I mean, all kinds of systems out there that need to tie into the ERP. And that changes the footprint from what used to be a fairly big footprint of applications to now maybe a little bit more diminished footprint with a lot of integrations.
Yes, one of my favorite words is the integrations part, right? And so it's definitely, as you say, the ERPs has definitely got the regular, we'll say, modules down. But when it comes to a little bit more of the intricacies that can happen with construction, they don't have everything, right? And so inventory, equipment, all these things that sometimes people find a safety software that they really, really love and they've got to have.
Yep.
And so we've got to hook
Yep.
that up. So
Yep.
that's a lot different. All right.
It
Anything else
is.
that you noticed? Go ahead.
Well, I think that the ERP developers, well, one development I would say is that the publishers, as they're called, have changed their model a little bit too. Most of these companies are now publicly traded or backed by venture capital, private equity firms. So they're
Mhm.
all owned by somebody instead of being privately held as they were before. That's changing a little bit of the dynamic. The other thing I would say is that they're struggling. They can't keep up and be best in class in everything. So what
Mhm.
they have to decide what are they willing to give up and what do they want to maintain to have a competitive advantage. So
Mhm.
I've seen a number of ERP software companies decide they're going to give up on HR because they
Yeah.
can't keep up with UKG and ADP and Alcoro and other ones in terms of functionality, self-service, and benefits and all that. So they just say, okay, we're not going to be in the HR business anymore. And so again, changing footprint for the ERP publishers, but it also forces then companies who might have relied on that before to now go find a third-party solution. And it
Mhm.
increases the pressure on the ERP publishers to maintain a pretty powerful tech stack, API libraries and such, in
Mhm.
order to integrate with third-party solutions.
Yeah, yeah, that is really interesting. I'll have to say, one of my, I don't know if I've ever shared this with you, but one of my little favorite things, we'll say passion projects, is mergers. So anytime companies eat each other, I'm here for it. And I love to understand that and know that. So I've kind of seen that too. And would you say that now that they're kind of like piecing together all of these, right? So it's not even, that Sage built all of Intact. It was purchased, it was married, new things were written, and that's different now, right?
Well, yeah. So it's funny you say that because I would say Sage Intact and Acumatica and IFS really, all three of those came out of manufacturing and they had to be retooled to fit
Mhm.
construction. Now, that has some interesting dynamics when you're trying to implement them because sometimes there's data structures and procedures that look more akin to manufacturing than pure construction.
Yeah, and that can throw people for a loop. Some things are
Yeah,
like you'll get into a particular platform and it'll be called a sales contract, right, or something like that. And so,
exactly,
yeah, it's a
exactly.
little different. Yeah.
Now, but there is an advantage in that. There actually is a pretty significant advantage.
All right, let's hear
The
it.
the pre, the prefabrication, prefab or modular building. There's much
Mhm.
more of that, particularly in the mechanical electricals and some of the general builders. They're going into that prefabrication idea. So
Yep.
they are starting to behave more like a fabricator than, I
Mhm.
mean, sorry, manufacturing company than a pure general contractor. So the fact that an ERP can serve the construction needs and then grow into the serving the fabrication division is a positive.
Yeah, yeah, I can agree with that one there. And so that's kind of like an unforeseen advantage, right? Which they're
Indeed, indeed. The legacy ERP solutions that you and I know of, the Viewpoint Vistas and the Spectrums and Coins, and they don't have anything for manufacturing. So
yeah.
I mean, they've got inventory control, but they don't have any of the shop floor management. So the fact that some of these solutions have manufacturing can be a positive.
Hmm. Yeah, definitely. And I'm sure we'll see a lot. I'm curious to see a lot of that more happen because people are going to, and we'll about to switch to the current market, but there's going to be a lot of folks, maybe picking up scopes of work that they didn't used to just because, they want to kind of increase the profits and decrease their costs there. And in-housing it may be something that they can do now.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the other things that I've noticed, Maria, is that we've been working with some pretty interesting firms of late, and these firms have grown tremendously in the last, call it 10 years. I mean, firms that were doing 200 million a year are now doing $1 billion a year, but they still operate like 200 million at
Yes.
best.
Yeah.
And so they're accustomed to an ERP that might have been appropriate for them at that prior level. And now when you get to $1 billion, there's a lot of differences in expectations, requirements, controls, all of that. So sometimes it's not just about getting off of a legacy solution, which everybody's comfortable with, maybe, but also trying to meet, and really, are we trying to meet the demands of the organization today? Or shouldn't we be really looking a year, 3-5 years out to where the firm is going to be? So, because you really don't want to be having to be back at the table 3 years, 5 years from now, contemplating ERP again.
Yes, I've noticed that with a few clients, is that some of them, when they approach us, they're 2 or 3 years out in their plan already, and they're saying, "Hey, we know that we're going to have bigger needs, right? We have plans. We see how we're going to expand. We've got our plan to serve there and build. But how is our technology going to help us do that? Or is it going to hinder us? And what can we do to plan for that?" So I'm seeing that a lot more in those long-term plans.
Yep.
All right. Well, let's switch it then, because the current market is a little wild, right? It's like the wild, wild west. If you wanted to build something, then build it. I'd have to say, I know a lot of folks that used to work in construction. They had a particular pet peeve, and they went out and they built an entire platform to take care of that pet peeve. And now they're changing the world. And I love it. I'm here for it. But again, it's an integration, and it's usually very, very focused on what that person was experiencing.
Yes. Yeah, that one I've seen quite a bit. We used to get phone calls probably once, twice a year from a contractor's like, "Hey, I built this estimating system and I want to take it out to the marketplace." And it's not typically built on a modern stack. It's like you said, very particular to the way that company did business, and they think everybody else would be okay with that. It's not very flexible typically, because they don't build that sort of thing in. Why would you need that? This way is the right way. So I would say that I'm a little cautious when that presents itself. Now, but you bring up this idea of build versus buy. And I think with software prices ebbing up as they have, talk about inflation. We've seen some pretty big inflation in construction software. Companies are starting to evaluate, could we not actually make this ourselves? If it took us a year and we spent, I don't know, 100,000 or some number, $200,000, and it meets our needs, and we have to maintain it, but we've eliminated possibly a very expensive piece of software. So even though the marketplace is flush right now with solutions, I would say that it is competitive. It's highly competitive. So nobody in your audience should be thinking about paying list price for software. Things are highly negotiable right now.
Yes, that is a very good point. I know we're talking about people who are planning on expansion, right? So as the builders are planning on expansion, so would the software companies that serve them, right? And so when we talk about that, who's going to get that piece of the market? Because there's only so much, right? The market is only so big. You've all got to pick one of them. So who's it going to be? I will say the ones that I see being successful or staying in the market and growing are the ones who, like you say, they realize that, oh, I was just filling one need, and a lot of our customers need XYZ, functionality. Let's add that. And so they're keeping that door open of saying, hey, we're here to evolve with you.
Yeah, I think too that products today are being built with more flexible platforms. So you could add a field, you could add a table, you can write your own reports, you can dump the data out into your own data warehouse or data mart. You can create an integration back to a system. So I think people are building platforms that way, with that in mind. The old days of like this monolithic piece of software that has one way of doing things and limited integration, that ship has sailed.
Yeah, that's right. And that was curious to hear you say it that way, because that's kind of what they were. It was like this huge, but you think about the time period we're talking, I mean, was it really the 80s, right? And so they're coming on to the market and they're saying, here, you no longer have to keep your books by hand. Welcome to the modern world. And that's what they were. They were these huge things, right? To match those huge computers that they went with. And so now we don't have to do that anymore.
No, I think that's right. But an ERP solution is large, it is complex, and software that was built perhaps in the 90s would have been pre-internet and certainly pre-cloud and pre-mobile. So very static, very kind of, in today's terms, very dated. So these firms struggled during the 90s into the 2000s, into the aughts, with transitioning into web-based, internet-based solutions, remote access. Some of them haven't even made that transition yet.
That's true.
But then immediately following that, you had the flood of mobile devices and mobile connectivity. And so now, instead of being on a web platform, browser platform, you needed to be on a mobile platform and operate detached. And now you've got to do all this connectivity. Again, in the 90s, that wasn't even a thought. And these ERP systems, particularly the legacy ones, I mean, they have millions, 5-10 million lines of code. So it's a challenge to refresh that quickly.
Yeah. And as far as recreating things, right? So usually the custom folks we see it's because they've got such a specific list of functionalities that they absolutely need. And it could be as simple as, I need this to upload a picture while offline because our job sites are really remote. That one single function can just kind of ruin it and make it all into a custom build type kind of situation at that point.
Yep, exactly.
Okay, so we've got all this kind of moving around. People are coming in the market. So what's our strategy then? How are we supposed to get the most out of our tech stack?
Well, I would say that a couple of things. Good question. I think that firms should absolutely focus on business process, not necessarily the technology, at least not first. So I see a lot of firms that don't examine their business processes. Then when they get new technology, they fundamentally implement what they do today in this new software. They don't reevaluate, retool business process to take advantage. Second thing they don't do is train their personnel sufficiently. So now I've got a new platform, new processes, and people are struggling with how to use it. So the adoption is low. And to me, I think the focus on process and the focus on training, those two things help drive that ROI, that value, if you will. The other thing I would say is that sometimes companies will implement a solution and get to a plateau of being done and then stop. And they don't actually go to the next level, get into some of the advanced functionality. A lot of the software vendors will lament the fact that their customers are using 30% of the functionality in a given product. So I think, in my mind, particularly with the larger solutions that are more robust, you almost should never stop implementing. You should always be evolving and improving.
I love that idea of continuous improvement, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is that
Exactly.
It's really a different mind shift because when I was growing up, and I think this particular part was the same for you, is the idea of like, well, when you turn 18 or you get that job or whatever, you're an adult. That's it. You're done. You're grown. And now it's kind of like, well, wait a minute. This is an ongoing process, and I need to continue learning until I'm
Continue to mature. Sure. Yep.
yeah.
And now, how does that happen? Well, there are some positions, Maria, that we've seen, and I think you have too, evolve in this marketplace. So we never
Yes.
had the role of a business analyst 10 years ago. Very few firms had a business analyst. Now, a lot of firms have business analysts. Those people, their job is continuous improvement, improve
Yes.
process, implement technology, guide, lead, push. That role is highly valuable. We also haven't had process owners. We haven't. So let's imagine in a firm that's, mid-size or larger, who with one person who's the owner of the billing process. So they know the entire process from front to back. They help continually improve that process. They make sure the technology supports that process. They help get people off spreadsheets, for example. So a process owner has that kind of distinction. The other one that's very important is we would say a super user or a champion. So to your world, Procore, having a Procore champion is somebody that not only knows the product and uses it, but actually becomes a bit of an evangelist in the organization who can train people, troubleshoot sometimes. They go to the Procore conference and learn what's new, bring it back to the organization. I mean, it's not a full-time job, but it's a very important, very valuable job. So having that super user dedicated to one technology can be very effective as well. So I think the organizations are changing some in a response to this sort of flood of new technology.
Yeah, I love that you brought that up because sometimes, and I think it does have to do with size, right? As far, if you're 10 people living your best life, building the world, we love you too. And when you grow, there's certain things that happen, right? And when you've got 500 people that have a question about the same platform, who are they gonna call? Is there a Ghostbuster hotline? Because they're gonna need one for that platform. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's interesting. So the vendors have help desk, and there are consultants out there that know the products that can help too. But this champion not only knows the product, but actually knows the company and the processes and the people. So they're much more aware of how that solution could work in the organization, how it's been set up and configured, how it's been integrated. So really, they become almost a first line of defense.
Well, I'd like to say offense, right? I don't know about defense, but they're out there making sure people are interested. They know how to do their process. Do they need help? And it's really it's a fun role to kind of be in, or at least it was for me, right? Because I was getting to learn so much from these different people that were all needing help with the same program, but from different offices, different what do we call it? I almost called them countries, but I meant states. So, because there's different rules per state sometimes for building, right? So different questions.
Yeah, that's right. And I mean, it gives you as a champion like that, you get visibility into a different level of how the organization is adopting. And you realize, hey, there's a better way we could do this. We could roll it out. Now, I would also say that there's another role that I like to talk about sometimes, and that is an executive sponsor. So imagine we've got a company that is trying to implement Procore, but there's no executive sponsor. So now you get assigned to go implement Procore, but people are like, well, I don't really want to do it that way. I don't have time. I got a job meeting, all these excuses, right? The job of an executive sponsor, who's typically someone that carries a fairly big stick or a carrot, as it were. And when you have the job of getting it implemented, that's who you go to if you need additional backing. So having an executive sponsor on any deployment of size, generally a good idea. Somebody at the top needs to say, hey, this is important for the organization. I'm behind it. Don't ask me to be in every meeting, but I'll back you up, and I'll make sure that the messaging is clear to the organization. So
Yeah.
executive sponsor is another good one.
Yeah, yeah. I love that you mentioned that one too, because I can't tell you how many people I would, convince to use the technology, teach them how to use it, get them thriving and loving it. And then they go around and they turn in their monthly project status report. And the person above them says, I want the old paper. Can you give me the old version?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So I think there's a much more sophisticated, I guess, way in which software and process should be introduced and developed in the organization, so that you don't have that sort of idea. And I think too, I think that mentality is starting to leave, because that mentality is unfortunately guys and gals of my age who, did all this before the newer technology and get set in their ways. But those people are retiring out of construction, and everybody that's in a position now, I would say, embraces technology for the most part, comfortable, capable. So it should be an easier road than it was.
Sure. Sure. And then another one I used to see too is that sometimes, you'd have, like we're talking about, check out the new technology. Sometimes you send somebody real quiet, like from your organization, hey, go check this out, talk, watch this demo, tell me what it's like, try it on a project even. And so then you get this sort of feeling and mood around that, oh, well, we're just going to try another platform next month or next quarter. And so I'm not going to learn this one. But in reality, it'll be like the one that everybody's purchased. It's now in use. And they're just not aware because they thought they were shopping and they didn't know. There's nobody telling them to use it. Right.
Yep.
So it's hard.
Well, yeah, it is. That's interesting you bring that up. So that definitely falls in the category of something called shadow IT. So we have like or the older term was skunk work, or back just initiatives that are brought into the organization without like control, without sanction, without oversight. Like a project manager at a job site getting a box account on his credit card, like that sort of thing happens. And without it's not that the IT department wants to like run it and they don't want to control it, but they do want like involvement. So what's another position, Maria, that's kind of interesting, I'm sure you've seen this from time to time in bigger firms, is the director of innovation.
Yes.
So director of innovation is a position kind of a little higher level, actually, but their responsibility is to do nothing but circulate in the organization and identify places where new technology could be applied to bring value. So drones in the field, AI, robotics, prefabrication, IoT. I mean, there's just so much going on. So their job is to kind of innovate and bring ideas in a controlled manner to the organization. And I mean, I've seen quite a few people in that position in, again, mid-size and larger firms.
Yeah, yeah. My favorite is when there's one of each, right? There's a director specifically for innovation, and then a director specifically for like the overall tech stack of the whole company. Then you've got somebody who can focus on those new cool things or even custom builds, and then somebody who's working on the holistic part working together.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Maria, because the typical firms we see don't have a large IT department. Their IT departments were built originally to maintain hardware and networks and security and things like that. Now that's changed quite a bit as we've got more hosting out now and MSPs available and such. But IT is still maintenance mode, not driving innovation. So if you want someone out bringing new ideas, you've got to get it outside of IT because they just don't have the staffing for that. And I think one thing that's nice about the director of innovation is that they're not encumbered by budgets and personnel. And I mean, they get to really shop and evaluate, but they are mindful of values. So they're not just bringing everything in the door. They're really evaluating the new technologies and determining which ones have the most potential for the organization. And then once the idea has been evaluated and someone's like, I like that, that could be a tremendous help. Then it goes into selection, evaluation, deployment, and so forth.
Mm-hmm. And all of the things after that, right? So that's why some of the better ones too for the directors of innovation, or even this is for any director really, is that they'll listen to the people doing the work, right? Because because you think it's a good idea and somebody told you it was a good shiny new product doesn't mean that it really is for your people.
Yeah. I think that's what I've noticed is these directors of innovation, they get out to the job sites pretty regularly. Yes. They're talking to project managers, project engineers. They're watching superintendents and foremen. I mean, they're really evaluating how work gets done or bid or estimated. I mean, they're just right on the front lines. And I think that's where the value is. So, yes.
Yeah, it really is, right? And so we've got to, that's why we're here, is that we're just here to help the builders. I can't build, or else I would, be out there with I guess I'd be a masonry person. That'd be fun to me. Just
a mason, just call a mason.
Just a mason. See, I don't even know the right words. I'd have to get a new vocabulary. That's okay. All right. So then if we've got all of these and the strategies, we talked a little bit about the importance of the business processes during implementation. So I'm going to kind of start you off with an example of one that just kind of, I understand it and I understand the why, but it still just gets me every time, is the folks that are waiting and purposefully doing this, right, to evaluate their work breakdown structure when they move ERPs. So they'll say, and it makes sense, right? We're using an old numbering system, phase codes, cost codes for everybody else out there who may be more familiar with those words. We're using those, and now we're going to buy a new ERP. And so should we update our coding system now?
Yeah. So if I were to use that example, I think that, again, back in the old days, if I can say that, back in the old days, estimators worked from a cost code structure that suited them, and they had many codes. And then when they were awarded a job, they would hand off the budget to a project manager who then recoded it according to the way he wanted to build it. So now I've lost the integrity between the way I bid it and the way I've costed it.
Yep.
Now that problem has gone away some. Where they've brought those two together. Now, the other problem I've observed is when a company gets, again, this may be a little more how it was before, but billing requirements from the owner. The owner says, I got to bill it this way. And so all of a sudden we make our changes to our cost code structure to accommodate billing. And now I can't even look at a cost code in my job cost system and know that code was reliable in terms of what was put there. So for example, mechanical cost might be in a mechanical line item, but then my instrumentation might be in that code, or it might be in a different code because of the way the owner wants to see it. And my philosophy, and I'm sure yours too, is no, mechanical lines should be exactly the same in the way you want to cost the job. You can have a major code and a few minor codes to break it out in more detail when you need to. But the idea of making all these changes when you need to bill, and today's systems don't require that. You can actually have a billing code structure completely separate. Now, changing cost codes is an epic event.
It is.
Because now you got to train the field, you got to train project managers, you got to so it's huge. So companies typically don't do that just because they don't like the current structure. So they use the implementation of a new job cost system as a reason to rethink it.
Yeah, that's a great point. And depending, a little bit of the details of kind of what you were talking about with the estimating teams and the switch from once you bid the job, you win the work, and now you've got to put it in as a live job number and manage that live budget. And so the good companies, the estimator and the project manager talk, they say, okay, this money's going to go here. Okay, I understand you put it in this code, but I'm going to put it in this code. And some of them just kind of do the handoff. And so, but inside of that, what's been going on too, is that the estimators had their own, from what I understand, their own set of codes that they were using. And then the project managers, right, were learning a different set. And then as I understand it, right now there's this emerging from the past, in the past 3-5 years, maybe, of kind of like a joint grouping of codes that we're all going to adhere to, hopefully one day, as far as getting that kind of more ironed out, right?
Well, I think the CSI code structure was like a 17 segment code structure, and then now the new version is like 31 or 34, some number. So there definitely is standardized codes available, but contractors have to agree that they can work within that structure. Now, estimating might continue to be in a more detailed code structure. Most estimating software systems support both. So you can have a detailed estimating code structure in your estimating system and push those values into your budget code structure before handing it off to the project managers.
Yes.
But
Yeah,
I wanted to touch a little bit more broadly on this topic you brought up of business process. So I just left a company that's starting a fairly large scale implementation of an ERP, 14 months or so. We started working through business processes. We had the appropriate people in the room for accounts payable, for billing, for job costs, for all the equipment, all the different functions. And we're having kind of fundamental conversations around business process. How do we want to charge labor to jobs? How do we want to charge equipment to jobs? How are we going to pay vendors? Who sets up vendors? Like fundamental. And we're doing this with the team of people that are going to implement the software. Now, that's a critical requirement, I think, in order to have a good design. And what I've seen, and this is going to be slightly critical, but what I've seen is a lot of software vendors are in a hurry to get into the company, ask questions, set it up, and then get them implemented and out the door. And they never have these fundamental questions. So then what happens is when they come in without this focus on process improvement, instead of asking, how do you want to do it? The easier thing is to say, well, what do you do today? So then we get a whole lot of answers around what do we do today? And we just implement that in the new software. So I think in some ways, it's like getting a good design on a building before you start pouring foundations. So that's what we do in business process. And I think a lot of organizations would benefit from doing that concentrated process work before they just start flipping switches in software.
Yeah, I love it. I love that you brought that up, because that's a really good one. And one of the main reasons we spend a lot of our time in what is it that we have? Is it Visio, right? But like mural board, these, so you can draw out these processes, because just because we did it one way, talking about continuous improvement, and now we're switching to a new platform, doesn't mean we have to do it the same way. But you're totally right. That's exactly what I've even witnessed and heard, right? They're asking, what's your current process? And it's really an opportunity to remake your process at all. You no longer have to walk down the hall with your paper and say, can you please sign this so I can do my next part, right? It's all digital and going through. So there's some steps you don't need.
Yep, exactly. And it really, it's been fun, because I ask the question, well, what are you doing today? And I learn about a spreadsheet that they're doing and maintaining. I'm like, well, that's going to go away when we move to this new system. And there's some angst in the room when you do that, but killing some spreadsheets is inevitable and beneficial for the organization.
It is. It is. And I'd have to say it's probably like if anybody remembers, because I feel like we've got a good spread of people in the workforce, right? But it was kind of like when you first kicked everybody off crystal reports. That's why I almost pass out when I hear somebody say that they're still got a crystal report, because I'm like, whoa, that's a blast from the
Yeah,
past.
indeed, indeed.
But
Well,
they're still out there, and it's because they're working.
so what's interesting is you also you'll find accounting departments. So and you're not even old enough to remember this, but accounting departments used to run reports out of a system, and they would put them in people's mail slots, and that's how
Yes.
people got their reports.
Yes. Old
Then
enough.
we modernized that, and now accounting runs reports PDF and puts them
Yep.
on emails and send them out via email. I mean, I have to say, that's not a process I would generally support. So instead, I want dashboards and Windows inquiry capability so that I'm able to, as a project manager or purchasing manager or equipment manager, I can access the information. I can see it on the screen. I don't need to wait for somebody to send me a report. So, I mean, it's examples like that where we really have to try and streamline.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good one, is that you don't have to wait until that monthly report comes out, right? You can just nowadays you could just click on it and you get this, we're calling it a dashboard, right? But it's really effectually
Yep.
these reports that we used
Yep.
to wait for and run and make sure they were right, run again.
Well,
And you're just
and the problem with those reports, as you well know, is they're kind of static. First of all, they're probably dated, like they're as a point in time, and maybe things have
very,
changed since the report came out. And if there's a question about something on the report, now I've got to send out an email, call somebody,
mhm,
say, what's this for?
mhm.
Rather than having the ability to drill down into the data and actually find out what's going on by yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good one. So here's what my mom was switching to retail for just a little bit. My mom was in retail, and so she'd print out these huge stacks and go through every page. And if you find an error, you got to go fix it and print out the whole stack again and go through the stack again. Right.
Amazing.
And so,
Yeah.
yeah, it's just so amazing to me. And those were all crystal reports. And so that's what I remember. And I think, oh my gosh, if you're still, and I really do understand, it works and it solves a problem that you need. And you don't have to do it that way anymore. You don't have to have somebody on a Sunday sit and run a 2-hour report to get your data.
Yep.
Yeah. So, all right. Very good. Well, it looks like we're about at time. I'm not seeing any questions and answers. So I thought we'll throw up the banner just for funsies, or if you had anything else that you wanted to share with anybody today that was listening and trying to learn how to navigate this market. Awesome. Okay. Well, we're not seeing any curious questions. So it leads me to believe that we did such a good job explaining, and that we're going to have a lot of lurkers on the replays. And so that'll be just as
Good.
fun for
Yeah.
me. Go ahead. What are we going to say?
Well, I was just first of all, thank you for inviting me into your meeting, and it's a topic I have enjoyed working on with contractors over the last while, and there is outrageous amounts of opportunity to streamline this industry. Maria, I don't know if you talk about this on your podcast or not, but McKinsey did that study some years ago and rated all industries on automation and digitization. And we were,
what was that?
and we were not last.
Okay.
We were second to last. So our industry has enormous opportunity. Now, the other thing that's interesting, though, is that we are a very fractured industry. It's not like automotive or perhaps aerospace or something where you have these behemoth companies and there's only 10 or 12 or 50 or whatever. I mean, we have tens of thousands of contracting companies, and they all do things in different ways, and there's not a ton of pressure for them to standardize. So solutions like Procore actually do create a impetus, if you will, to standardize. But that's a commercial kind of pressure. You're not getting the same pressure from owners, from the government, from other, entities. So I would say that we're going to be, and then the economics aren't great. So now we don't have just huge budgets to
Yeah.
automate this industry. So it has to come from within. The motivation and the funding has to come from within largely. And so like firms really need to make it a priority and kind of develop a roadmap for how to get into a modern space.
Yeah, that's a great point. And then also what I've seen is, getting somebody to kind of guide you through that, and not only guide you, but also kind of be that shield, if you will, in between you and the vendors, because there's going to be a lot of people that really have awesome products and they want to share them with you and get you to buy them. But which
Yep.
one, again, is right for your people and for your continuous improvement of your processes?
Yep. Well, and just on that point, I will share a personal story. I actually
Yeah.
use a personal trainer, and I never
Okay.
was the guy that would do that. I thought, oh, I can
Great.
go to the gym and work out. And I got a personal trainer, and I'm amazed at the
Okay.
difference. Like I learn how to do things differently. I'm motivated. I'm seeing results. Like it having someone help you through a process like that is amazing. And it
Mhm.
helps like when you and I work on these things, it helps reduce the noise and confusion from the marketplace so we can concentrate on what's important for the contractor before we charge out and start buying stuff.
Yeah. I love that one. That is a good example, even though it's kind of like me switching to retail. It's like, yeah, if you get a trainer, that's really what it's like, right? And kind of like, you're very direct and saying, here's what I want, here's what I need to achieve, help me get there. And then
Yep.
this too, but you didn't say, it was like you kind of have accountability now. Like there's somebody who's gonna,
Expect you
know.
to be there.
Yeah.
Yes, yes, indeed. Well, Maria, thank you so much for this opportunity, and hope
Yeah.
your viewers enjoyed.
Me too. Thank you so much for taking your time here. It looks like we had one that said it was really insightful. So we got our just one. So that was a good day.
Good deal. Good deal. Thanks,
All
Maria.
right.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Christian. Bye bye.